Imagine you have nowhere to be, nothing to read, and it has been raining for 4 days straight. No fire is going to fix that. You are just waiting. This is the question almost nobody asks about prehistoric life. Not how did they survive the mammoth, but what did they actually do on a slow Tuesday in November when the whole band was stuck under the same overhang? The honest answer is that we are partly guessing. But the guesses are grounded in real evidence. Fire pit ash, tool debris, pigment traces, and comparisons with forager groups still observed in the 20th century. First, let's be clear about what a rain event actually meant. Hunter-gatherer bands in the Pleistocene, roughly before 12,000 years ago, typically numbered 15 to 50 people. They moved constantly, following game and seasonal plants. A week of hard rain in Western Europe, or the African savanna, or coastal Australia, genuinely stopped that movement. You could not track, you could not easily forage. Brian Hayden, an archaeologist who has spent decades studying prehistoric band societies, argues that enforced proximity was one of the most consistently underestimated pressures in early human social life. Boredom and irritation were real problems. So what happened to that tension? The first thing the archaeology actually shows us is tool maintenance. Across dozens of Middle and Upper Paleolithic sites, the densest concentrations of small flint-resharpening flakes appear around hearths. This was not urgent survival work. A lot of the retouching was on tools that were already functional, refining the edge a little more, smoothing a grip. The best interpretation is that it was something to do with your hands while you sat. Think of it like whittling on a porch. The object does not strictly need the extra work. You are keeping your hands busy, staying calm, doing something familiar. This is also, almost certainly, when skill got transmitted. Not on an efficient hunting morning, but on a slow rain day when an experienced adult had time and a young person was sitting right there with nowhere to go. Bone and antler working shows the same pattern. At Abry-Blanchard in southwestern France, excavated in the early 20th century, researchers found concentrated deposits of engraved bone and ivory near old hearth sites. Some pieces showed deliberate decorative carving that served no practical function. A curved piece of antler with a series of notches cut in no obvious pattern. Hours of work for something that is essentially just pleasing to make. This matters because it pushes back on the idea that art and expression were rare or special. They may have been exactly what you turned to when you were bored and stuck inside. Then there is the social fabric. Ethnographic observations of 20th century forager groups, the Kung San of southern Africa, studied extensively by Richard Lee in the 1960s and 70s, the Hadza of Tanzania, tell a consistent story. When movement stopped, talking increased, and not just conversation, storytelling specifically. Polly Wiessner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, published a study in 2014 comparing daytime and nighttime talk in Zhuhuan Bushman camps. She found that night talk, and by extension sheltered indoor time, was dominated by stories, distant people, past events, spirits, and social memory. Daytime was logistics. Downtime was narrative. We cannot hear those stories, but we can see their residue. The cave paintings at Lascaux, at Altamira, at Chauvet. Some of the deepest chambers required carrying light sources far from the entrance. That took deliberate, sheltered time. The ochre and manganese used at these sites was ground and mixed at hearth sites nearby. That preparation is slow work. Someone had uninterrupted time to do it. Sleep is the obvious one, and easy to undercount. Modern forager groups in detailed sleep studies, work done by Jerome Siegel and colleagues at UCLA published around 2015, sleep roughly 6.5 hours at night, but nap opportunistically during the day. A rainy week probably involved a lot of horizontal time. Not illness, not depression, just the body taking rest it could not afford when work was available. There is nothing dramatic about this. It just happened. Children complicate the picture in interesting ways. A band with 6 or 8 children under 12 years old, stuck in a 20-meter wide shelter for 5 days, creates a specific kind of chaos. We do not have direct evidence of play in the Paleolithic, Play leaves almost nothing behind. But infant and child skeletons from this period show patterns of physical development consistent with high activity levels. They were not sitting still. There were also practical chores that made sense to do while sheltered. Hides that needed scraping and working, sinew that needed twisting into cord, plant fibers being processed. At the 23,000-year-old site of Ohalo II in Israel, preserved under the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists found grass bedding and plant processing debris clustered inside brush hut footprints. That inside work pattern is very old. Grooming is another one. Lice archaeology, which is a real and surprisingly revealing field, suggests that body lice became widespread around 100,000 years ago, consistent with regular close contact. Extended proximity during shelter time maintained social bonds through touch. Music probably happened too. Bone flutes found at sites like Hohlefels in Germany, dating to around 40,000 years ago, are the clearest evidence. But percussion, hand clapping, stones struck together, hollow logs, leaves almost no trace. Here's where the honest archaeology has to slow down. The gap between what survives and what actually happened is enormous. Sound leaves nothing. Most organic material decays. What we have is hard debris from a soft life. The best archaeologists working on this, people like Clive Gamble, who wrote The Paleolithic Societies of Europe in 1999, are careful to say that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. We find what survives, not what was. What the combined picture suggests is this. A rainy week was not a crisis. It was a tempo change. The band slowed down, turned inward, repaired things, told stories, slept, argued, laughed, and waited. There is something almost familiar in that. Not because ancient humans were like us. They were not exactly. But the shape of a slow, stuck, indoor day is surprisingly consistent across a very long time. Next time you are stuck inside on a gray afternoon with nothing urgent to do, notice what you reach for. Probably something with your hands. Probably conversation. Probably a story. You have been doing this for a very long time. If questions like this one interest you, what it felt like to be alive before any of this was written down, there are more of them here. The next one is just as specific and just as hard to fully answer.